Flight attendant airline staff harassed black woman. 5 minutes later, she cancels their biggest contract. She adjusted her carry-on bag, trying her best not to draw attention, though a small part of her realized the eyes fixed on her were not simply casual glances. She was used to stares, used to defying expectations. But something about this morning felt different. Mortons glanced at her notebook and his words. Catherine said this. The very last time, she said, you are a traitor. Dressed in a tailored burgundy pantsuit, she exuded quiet confidence, her every step a testament to years of hard-earned success. Lisa was a woman on a mission, traveling to finalize a game-changing contract for an airline that prided itself on being a champion of diversity. Lisa had encountered prejudice before, yet she never let it deter her. As a seasoned negotiator and corporate trailblazer, she had learned to turn adversity into opportunity. However, what was about to unfold on this seemingly ordinary flight would test her resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. With a critical meeting on the horizon and her company's trust resting on her shoulders, Lisa focused on her goal. What she didn't expect was how a series of microaggressions and outright hostility on this short journey would compel her to take a stand not just for herself, but for others who had been treated unfairly. This is the story of how one woman's determination, courage, and integrity turned a routine flight into a reckoning that shook an entire corporation to its core. Let me know where you are watching from. Remember to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with many people to spread good values. Lisa Daniels arrived at the airport early, her carry-on bag neatly packed, her schedule perfectly timed. The day felt ordinary, but attention lingered in the air. She walked with the composed confidence of a seasoned professional, her burgundy pantsuit setting her apart from the casual travelers around her. As she approached the gate, her senses sharpened. It started subtly, the side glances from the airline staff as she scanned the boarding display. A gate agent whispered to a colleague while looking her way, their muffled laughter sending a quiet message that Lisa couldn't ignore. Passengers in line seemed to assess her, their gazes lingering as if questioning her presence. Lisa had seen this before. Quiet judgment cloaked in civility, an unspoken assumption that she didn't belong. Though she felt the weight of their stares, Lisa's expression remained neutral. She had a mission to complete, and she wouldn't let these minor slights derail her focus. She reminded herself of the stakes. This contract could redefine the airline's future, and she was the lead negotiator. Yet, a small voice inside her whispered that this day might not unfold as smoothly as she had planned. When the boarding announcement for business class passengers came, Lisa stepped forward, boarding pass in hand. She was greeted by a flight attendant whose polite smile faltered the moment their eyes met. "Ticket, please," the attendant said, her tone clipped. Lisa handed over her boarding pass. The attendant scrutinized it longer than necessary, her lips tightening. "Are you sure you're in the right boarding group?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. Lisa's heart quickened, but she maintained her composure. "I am," she replied calmly, pointing to the clearly marked Group 1 designation on her pass. The attendant hesitated before returning the pass, offering a curt, "All right, ma'am." Lisa moved forward, her posture steady, but the exchange lingered in her mind. She had dealt with such behavior before, the veiled disbelief, the undercurrent of prejudice. It never failed to sting, but she refused to let it show. Lisa settled into her seat in the business class cabin, near the window. Her carry-on bag fit neatly beneath the seat in front of her, just as the airline's policies allowed. She glanced around, noticing a few nearby passengers turning to look at her. Their surprise was evident, as though her presence disrupted their expectations of who belonged in this space. She opened her laptop, intending to review notes for the upcoming meeting, but her focus was disrupted by the same flight attendant reappearing. Sarah turned to look. "Excuse me, ma'am," the attendant said, her tone clipped. "We have some concerns about your carry-on bag. Can I see your boarding pass again?" Lisa raised an eyebrow, momentarily confused. "My bag is under the seat," she replied evenly, gesturing to the bag tucked neatly below her feet. The attendant leaned down, inspecting the space as if searching for an infraction. "All right," she said reluctantly, her expression souring. "Just make sure it's fully under the seat. We want to maintain a safe environment for everyone." Lisa nodded, biting back a sharp retort. She recognized the scrutiny for what it was, not a genuine concern for safety, but a targeted act to undermine her. She turned her attention back to her laptop, determined not to let the incident rattle her. As the flight progressed, Lisa couldn't help but notice the stark contrast in how the flight attendants interacted with other passengers. The same attendant who had questioned her seemed warm and accommodating toward others, her smile easy and her tone cheerful. Yet whenever she passed Lisa's row, her demeanor hardened, her actions terse and dismissive. It wasn't just Lisa. She observed the attendant questioning a young black man seated a few rows ahead, asking him repeatedly about his seat assignment despite his clear documentation. A black couple seated nearby was also subjected to unnecessary scrutiny over their business class upgrades, the attendant suggesting they might have to be reseated. Gentlemen, Lisa felt the tension build inside her. These weren't isolated incidents, they were part of a larger pattern. She wanted to stay focused on her work, but the injustice of the situation gnawed at her. Her heart sank as she realized that this wasn't just a matter of personal bias. It reflected a deeper systemic issue within the airline. Still, she reminded herself of her purpose. She was here to finalize a contract, one that could reshape this very airline's future. But as the flight went on, Lisa began to wonder, was she in a position to ignore what was happening? Or was it her responsibility to act? The journey was far from over, and Lisa's resolve to stay composed would soon be tested in ways she couldn't have anticipated. As the plane landed and Lisa Daniels stepped off, her mind was resolute. The series of microaggressions she witnessed and endured couldn't be brushed aside. Her phone buzzed as she moved through the terminal, a reply from the airline's regional director, marked urgent. The email was filled with apologies and promises. The director assured Lisa that the airline took such incidents seriously and would launch an immediate investigation. They requested her discretion while they conducted an inquiry, emphasizing the importance of resolving the matter amicably. Lisa read the words carefully but remained unconvinced. Apologies without action meant little to her. Strange contrast with action meant little to her. By the time she reached her destination, a sleek corporate office for the scheduled contract negotiations, Lisa had prepared her strategy. She wasn't just representing her company, she was now carrying the voices of those passengers who had been unfairly targeted. Her laptop bag, packed with the contract and her notes, also held documentation of the incidents she had witnessed. Inside the conference room, Lisa was greeted by the airline executives, their smiles polished but uneasy. They exchanged pleasantries, but Lisa could sense their apprehension. They must have been briefed on her flight experience, as evidenced by their cautious demeanor. After the formalities, the discussions turned to the contract. The executives spoke confidently about the partnership's potential, emphasizing the airline's commitment to innovation and inclusivity. Lisa let them speak uninterrupted, her demeanor calm and professional. When it was her turn, she began by addressing the finer points of the agreement. Then her tone shifted. "Before we move forward, I want to address an issue that occurred on my flight this morning," she said, her voice steady. The room grew tense. Lisa detailed the incidents she witnessed, describing the flight attendant's repeated targeting of black passengers. She presented her documentation, including notes on the discriminatory actions and passenger statements she had collected. The executives listened in silence, their expressions gradually shifting from surprise to discomfort. "This airline has marketed itself as a leader in diversity and inclusion," Lisa said, locking eyes with one of the executives. "But what I experienced tells a different story. Multiple incidents of racial discrimination occurred within a single flight. That's not a personnel issue, that's a systemic problem." One of the executives began to stammer out an explanation, insisting that this was an isolated incident. Lisa raised a hand, cutting him off politely but firmly. "It's not isolated, it's a pattern," she said, "and I believe your organization's commitment to inclusion is on trial here." The room fell silent. Then came the flurry of reassurances. The executives promised immediate action, mandatory bias training for all staff, a thorough review of hiring practices, and a public apology to the affected passengers. They pleaded for the opportunity to rectify the situation without jeopardizing the partnership. But Lisa didn't back down. She insisted on accountability measures written directly into the contract. These included a clause allowing her company to withdraw from the deal at any sign of continued discriminatory practices. She also demanded detailed updates on the airline's progress in addressing systemic issues. The contract was settled down to a sin. Her unwavering stance left no room for negotiation. The executives, recognizing the stakes, agreed to her terms. With the amended clauses in place, Lisa finally signed the contract. The airline representatives followed suit, their pens moving with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The deal was sealed, but it was clear that the partnership's future depended entirely on the airline's ability to deliver on its promises. In the weeks that followed, the airline underwent a significant internal shakeup. The flight attendant who had caused the incidents was suspended, pending a full investigation. The company announced new diversity initiatives, including a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior and regular cultural sensitivity training for all employees. Publicly, the airline issued a statement reaffirming its commitment to inclusivity. Privately, its leadership scrambled to ensure that Lisa's conditions were met, knowing that even the smallest misstep could jeopardize the contract. Lisa watched these developments cautiously. While the changes were promising, she understood that systemic reform wasn't achieved overnight. She remained vigilant, monitoring the airline's progress and holding them accountable to their commitments. The ripple effects of Lisa's actions extended beyond the airline. News of the amended contract and the internal changes it prompted began circulating in corporate circles. Other companies took note, realizing that diversity and inclusion weren't just values, they were business imperatives. For Lisa, the victory wasn't just about securing ethical reform. It was about sending a message: prejudice, whether overt or subtle, would no longer go unchecked. She had leveraged her power not just for herself, but for countless others who had faced similar injustices without the means to fight back. In private moments, Lisa reflected on the journey. She thought of the black couple who had been questioned about their upgrades, the young man scrutinized over his seat assignment, and the woman charged an unwarranted fee. She remembered their gratitude when she intervened, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Lisa didn't see herself as a hero. She saw herself as a professional who had simply refused to accept the status quo, and in doing so, she had catalyzed a change that reached far beyond the confines of that flight. Her story became a quiet but powerful testament to the impact one person can have when they stand firm in the face of injustice. For the airline, it was a turning point. For Lisa, it was a reminder that integrity and courage could reshape not just corporate policies, but lives. As Lisa Daniels disembarked from the plane, she immediately checked her phone. Among the flood of notifications was an email marked urgent from the airline's regional director. It opened with profuse apologies, acknowledging her report of the incidents on her flight. The director assured her that an internal investigation would begin immediately and promised swift action. As the plane took off from the airport, she gave the stranger on her flight. Lisa read the email with a critical eye. While the language was apologetic, she had seen similar platitudes before. Words alone were insufficient. She needed concrete steps to ensure accountability. Her focus shifted back to the high-stakes negotiation ahead, knowing the power of her position in the upcoming meeting could turn those promises into tangible change. At the corporate office, Lisa walked into the boardroom where the airline's executives were already waiting. Their polished smiles and warm greetings couldn't mask the tension in the room. They were aware of the incidents, and their discomfort was palpable. The meeting began with the usual pleasantries, the executives speaking confidently about the partnership's benefits. They emphasized the airline's dedication to innovation, growth, and diversity. Lisa listened patiently, maintaining her calm demeanor. When the conversation shifted to her, she began by addressing the business aspects of the contract, discussing logistics and projections. Then, she paused. "Before we move forward, I need to address what happened on my flight earlier today," Lisa said, her tone professional yet firm. The room fell silent. She detailed the incidents she had witnessed and experienced, the microaggressions, the baseless scrutiny, and the targeting of black passengers. Lisa presented her documentation, including detailed notes and passenger statements. She made it clear that this wasn't just an issue of one individual's behavior, but a systemic problem that called into question the airline's commitment to its stated values. The executives listened, their initial surprise giving way to discomfort. One of them offered an apology, calling the incidents regrettable and assuring her that the airline was committed to addressing them. Lisa wasn't satisfied with apologies. She leaned forward, her voice steady and deliberate. This airline has built its reputation on inclusivity and diversity. But what I experienced and what I saw others endure tells a different story. If we're to move forward with this partnership, there must be immediate, concrete action to address these issues. Her stance was unwavering. She outlined her demands. 1. Mandatory bias training. All staff, from executives to cabin crew, would undergo comprehensive bias and cultural sensitivity training. 2. Ethical oversight. An independent review board would be established to handle complaints of discrimination. 3. Contractual clauses. New terms would allow her company to withdraw from the agreement if there were further incidents of bias or failure to meet the promised reforms. The executives scrambled to salvage the partnership. They proposed solutions, including accelerated training programs, stricter accountability measures, and public transparency initiatives. One executive even offered to launch a diversity audit across the organization. Lisa held firm, reminding them that their promises needed to be backed by enforceable actions. She insisted that the new clauses be written into the contract, ensuring that her company retained the right to terminate the deal if the airline failed to deliver. The room grew tense as the airline executives realized she wasn't bluffing. They exchanged nervous glances, finally agreeing to her terms. With the amended clauses finalized, Lisa signed the contract. The airline executives followed suit, their relief tempered by the weight of their new obligations. The partnership was secure, but Lisa made it clear that this was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the airline underwent significant changes. The flight attendant responsible for the incidents was suspended pending a thorough investigation. The airline announced a series of new initiatives, including mandatory diversity training. All employees were required to attend quarterly sessions on cultural sensitivity and bias awareness. Zero tolerance policy, a clear and enforceable policy against discrimination, was implemented, with strict penalties for violations. Transparency measures, regular progress reports on diversity and inclusion efforts were shared with both the public and key stakeholders. Publicly, the airline issued a statement reaffirming its commitment to ethical practices. Privately, its leadership worked tirelessly to ensure compliance with the new contract terms, knowing that even a minor lapse could jeopardize the deal. Lisa watched these developments cautiously. While the reforms were promising, she understood the need for vigilance. Systemic change wasn't achieved overnight, and she remained ready to hold the airline accountable at the first sign of regression. The ripple effects of Lisa's actions extended beyond the airline. News of the amended contract and the internal reforms it prompted spread through corporate circles. Industry leaders began to take note, recognizing that diversity and inclusion were no longer optional, they were essential to business success. For Lisa, the victory was about more than just securing ethical reforms. It was about setting a precedent. Discriminatory behavior would no longer go unchecked, especially when the stakes involved significant partnerships. Her actions sent a powerful message to other companies. Accountability wasn't negotiable. Lisa often reflected on the passengers from her flight. The black couple questioned about their upgrades, the young man scrutinized over his seat, and the woman unfairly charged extra fees. She thought of their gratitude when she intervened, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her story wasn't about heroism, but about the quiet power of integrity and courage. She had stood firm against systemic bias, using her position not just for personal gain, but to create meaningful change. Months later, the airline's changes began to take root. Reports of discriminatory incidents declined, and customer satisfaction surveys reflected an improvement in treatment across the board. Lisa continued to monitor the airline's progress, ensuring they upheld their commitments. While she moved on to new projects, her influence remained. Colleagues sought her advice on navigating ethical dilemmas, and her story inspired others to stand against injustice in their industries. Lisa knew the fight against systemic bias was far from over, but she carried a quiet confidence. She had proven that even in the face of entrenched prejudice, one person could spark lasting change, and she knew that the ripple effects of her actions would continue to echo far beyond the boardroom. As Lisa Daniels left the boardroom that day, she carried with her a profound sense of accomplishment, not just for securing the contract, but for standing firm in the face of systemic prejudice. Her courage and composure had transformed a routine business negotiation into a catalyst for accountability and reform. Lisa had used her influence not just to benefit her company, but to challenge a corporate culture that had long allowed bias to go unchecked. The journey wasn't easy. She had faced subtle hostilities and outright microaggressions on her flight, experiences all too familiar to marginalized individuals. But instead of succumbing to frustration or silence, Lisa chose action. She remained calm, strategic, and professional, channeling her power to demand meaningful change. Her story is a testament to the strength it takes to navigate spaces where you're underestimated, judged, or targeted, spaces where your presence alone can be seen as defiance. By leveraging her position and her integrity, Lisa didn't just confront the biases she faced, she laid the groundwork for broader conversations about accountability and inclusion across the airline industry. The ripple effects of Lisa's actions were felt far beyond that single flight. Passengers who had witnessed the incidents saw someone stand up for them in a space where they might have felt powerless. Employees within the airline, many of whom had experienced similar discrimination, found hope in the reforms that followed. The airline itself underwent a transformation, with leadership implementing new policies and training programs that prioritized diversity and inclusion. These changes didn't just improve the corporate culture, they set a precedent for others in the industry. Lisa's insistence on accountability became a beacon, reminding companies everywhere that ethical behavior wasn't just good PR, it was good business. Lisa didn't stop there. She continued to advocate for marginalized voices in corporate spaces, using her platform to push for systemic reform. She partnered with organizations dedicated to equity and inclusion, sharing her story and encouraging others to hold corporations to higher standards. Her actions inspired colleagues, clients, and even competitors to reevaluate their own practices. The broader impact of her stance can't be overstated. Lisa's story wasn't just about one contract or one airline. It was about showing that change is possible when those with power choose to wield it responsibly. Lisa Daniels' story reminds us that even brief moments of courage can spark lasting change. Whether it's in a boardroom, a workplace, or an everyday interaction, the decision to speak up and demand better can create ripples that echo far beyond the moment. Her journey is a powerful example of how integrity and determination can transform systems and uplift others. It's a call to action for all of us, to confront injustice, no matter how deeply rooted it may seem, and to recognize the influence we have to make a difference. So what part of Lisa's story resonated with you the most? Was it her composure in the face of hostility, her unwavering commitment to fairness, or the ripple effect of her actions on others? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more real-life stories of resilience, courage, and transformation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, we can continue sharing these stories, inspiring change, one voice at a time. Lisa Daniels proved that one person can create a ripple that grows into a wave. What will your ripple be?